Hey guys, so I wanted to create a quick video on the rationale for how docstrings were implemented in Jac. So we have a really good question here from Taki. Does this docstring applicable to the module or the class? Do we have syntax ambiguity here? According to Lark, this is for module. And if we have to have a docstring for the very first class, you must have a docstring for the module. This should be fixed. And then Tammy responds, could we modify the Lark grammar such that these docstrings for an object would happen within the object? So in Jac, we have this rule of how docstrings must be treated for modules, objects, methods, functions, etc. So Jac follows more of a C++ style documentation pattern for documenting those objects in your program. And in C++, or I think Java works the same way in the pattern, you'll have the docstring before the object, or before the function, or before the method. When it comes to these two approaches, I tend to prefer the C++ Java style. And it's for a simple reason, right? So like in Python, the docstrings would appear like this, right? Where you have, you'll have your function, let's say myfunc, with two parameters coming in, and then you may have a long docstring, and usually this is to document the interface and to give a description and talk about the parameters and so forth. And then you'll have the code for the function. Now, the problem with this approach from my perspective is that it hurts readability. Meaning, and in many, many sophisticated code bases, you'll have very robust docstrings where you'll like be at the bottom of the docstring and then you'll have your code there. Now, it's very helpful as someone who reads a lot of code, it's very helpful to have the docstring before, because then your interface to the function appears next to the code. So it's much easier to read the code and understand what it's doing it, because you can see the parameters coming in and then the code of the function. So in this particular case, this function is returning just parameter 1. And you probably don't need a parameter 2 here. So an issue like that, or an inconsistency like that, would be easy to see here. But if you're reading a long code base and it looks more like this, it'd be a little bit harder to kind of reason about what the interface of the function is, because you'd have to scroll up and then scroll down and scroll up, and it's just a little bit more unwieldy to read. So with this, a problem potentially arises, right? If you have only one docstring before an object in your module, how do you know whether this is a module level docstring or the object level docstring, right? And so that might be, you might construe that as ambiguity. However, the grammar of the language is very strict and not ambiguous here. If you only have one docstring, it's assumed to be associated with the object, with the module level docstring. And if you have no docstring on the object, that is going to be the default. It's a module level. Now, so what does this do? This creates a new kind of rule. So if you want to use the language. So the rule is, if you only have a single docstring before your first object, it's going to be associated with module. Now, docstrings mean something very significant in Python. At the command line level, when you run Python, there is functionality assumed for the way you utilize docstring. So you could do Python doc. I forget what the exact keyword is, or it's like module gen docs or doc info or something like that. I can't remember. I have to look it up on GPT. But Python by default will render documentation for your code, for your module, for your code base, etc., as a built-in to the command line tool for Python. So we have to superset that behavior, right? And in the way we superset it with this strict rule, we essentially create a nudge, a very strictly held nudge, where if you're using docstrings and you only want to do your object, the docstring experience from Python docs isn't as good, because you have no documentation for a module. You just have documentation rendered for objects, and that creates an ugly and kind of it's a misuse of the real intent of the documentation feature. So we're almost creating rules that will nudge developers to be more systematic and disciplined with how they use docstrings. In that, if you're docstringing your objects, you should have a module level docstring that describes what the module does, right? So herein lies the trade-off. We can give a developer more freedom to kind of, not have a documentation at the module, and then they run into that readability problem with this kind of suggestion for the grammar. Or we could have the stricter rule where you get the readability. And so I kind of lean towards, let's take the readability and let's create that nudge for discipline in how you use docstrings at the module level. And so now that being said, you can still have no docstrings in the program. So if you have no docstrings, there's no docstrings. However, if you have a single docstring before that first object, then it's assumed to be the module level docstring, and then you'd have to create a docstring for the object. So it's important to mention that we're not forcing docstrings on anyone. We're just saying if you use docstrings, we're going to nudge you to use it the correct way, and because of the cost of that nudge, we're also going to gain this readability benefit, so that as you're reading code, which code is read 90% of, like, whatever, 10x more than code is written, code is read or something. I saw statistics on that. And so this is actually really nice for the experience of someone perusing a sophisticated code base. So that was where I landed. Now I'm open to suggestions, and there may be some points or some situations I haven't thought about. So I'm certainly open to suggestions. Do feel free to react to the video, or just Slack me or reach out to me with anything. I'm open, right? These are design decisions for a user experience, the user being a developer. So anyway, keep that in mind. Reach out to me if you have any thoughts, comments, and that's about it. Thanks. Peace.